It's also designed for people who aspire to be an IT leader, perhaps in 3 or 5 years' time. They could be positioning themselves as a potential CIO. And this course really covers all the different areas that IT leaders need to be on top of and need to be concerned about. What I do in this course is divide these topics into 3 categories. First, leading the business, leading the operation, and leading the people. And I would say these topics might change over time. I may add new topics. But just as an overview, under leading the business, there are important topics around business strategy, IT strategy, digital transformation, and IT governance. These are some of the topics we'll be covering in this particular course. Under the category of leading the operation, there are topics around project delivery, developing an IT architecture, IT security, business resilience, and IT service management. These are some of the topics we'll be covering in this course. And under the category of lead the people, there will be topics around developing the proper leadership mindset, building high-performance teams, developing win-win IT partnerships, and developing an agile organization. So these are some of the topics we'll be covering in this course. The way I like to design the content is really in small, short, concise videos so that it's easy to digest and understand. And it also means you can flip back and forth across topics should you so wish. So I hope this course is going to be something that's useful to you to develop your career, to develop your understanding about IT leadership. As I said, if you're an aspiring IT leader, this course is really designed for you in mind. Thank you. So let's start by talking about the role of an IT leader in today's environment. And I think there are multiple things, there are multiple roles that the modern IT leader has to play. So I think the first important role is to be part of creating the business strategy. And what we are seeing is so much business is being done online these days, and we're talking about the digital economy and digital services and really environment and being able to co-create the business strategy with technology as an integral. Second important role for the IT leaders of today is to become a strategic partner to the CEO, and that's very much consistent with the earlier point that I made about co-creating the business strategy. I think the IT leader has to work very closely with the CEO in the strategic decision making on the business side. They really have to understand what the major challenges are and work with the CEO to try and address those. I think another important role for an IT leader is to really educate others who are non-IT savvy. So it could be the company board, it could be the leadership team within the organization. They're not typically experts in technology. They don't have that deep understanding in the way that an IT leader has. And part of the role of an IT leader is really to educate people and to talk about the opportunities that are available with using the technology to really drive the business ambitions of the users, to align IT with business priorities. And this is particularly important, and to set an IT vision. And it's important that whatever that strategy is on the IT side, it's got to be aligned with the business priorities of that organization. And it's got to be helping the organization move in that particular direction. Of course, we talked about strategy quite a bit. At the end of the day, IT has got to work efficiently and effectively. We see so many disruptions with IT these days, and we know things like cybersecurity are a big issue. That the IT function, the IT operations runs as smoothly. That also means part of the role of an IT leader. It's some costs. Costs are going up, and the role of an IT leader is to make sure that costs are reduced as much as possible. So IT has to work within a certain budget. IT costs have to be optimized and reduced as far as possible. But aside from that, it's also important that any investments in IT deliver a strong return on investment. So making sure that the money that an organization invests in its IT function and IT services, making sure there's a proper payback and a proper return on that investment. Environment organizations typically have to work with external vendors, technology partners, and other types of partners. And the role of an IT leader is to make sure that these partnerships are really win-win partnerships. They're relationships that deliver value for the organization. They're actually adding to the value in organization, and they're helping the organization further its business priorities. So that is what I see as the key role for the modern IT leader. Part of it is strategic, part of it is functional, part of it is around cost, and part of it is around maintaining strong partnerships with external vendors and providers. Okay, so what CIO.com have done is come up with 3 CIO archetypes. And these CIO archetypes each have a different function, or focus rather. The first type of archetype is the functional CIO. And what they would do is they spend most of their time on the IT operations, making sure that that operation runs as smoothly as possible. They would typically spend a lot of time with IT vendors and service providers. They would be thinking about the IT budgets a lot, and they would be working a lot with the IT operations team to make sure that IT functions and operations runs as smoothly as possible. That's what the functional CIO archetype is. The transformational CIO, and they would spend most of their time on business trying to so that's the transformational archetype, is the business strategist CIO, and this type of CIO spends most of the time working around business strategy. So they would be looking at competitors, how they're working in the space. They would be looking at business innovation, new types of products and services, for example, and they would be spending most of their time working with the CEO and the C-suite to really drive some of those initiatives. So there are 3 CIO archetypes here: the functional CIO, the transformational CIO, and the business strategist CIO. I think in reality, most CIOs or IT leaders would be involved to different degrees in all 3 of these different elements, but where they spend most of their time on would really determine which archetype they belong to. So if it's more around the operations, it's a functional CIO. If it's more around business processes, it's going to be a transformational CIO. And if it's more around the overarching business strategy and business direction, that's going to be more of a business strategist CIO. So consulting firm Deloitte came up with something that was very similar to what I shared in the earlier video around the CIO archetypes. They came up with 3 CIO patterns which resembled the 3 CIO archetypes, and this was based on a global CIO survey that they conducted in 2016 and 17. It involved over 1,200 participants, and what they did was they identified really 3 CIO patterns. And the 3 patterns are trusted operator, change instigator, and business co-creator. And as I said, these are very similar to the 3 CIO archetypes that I talked about in the earlier video. So what's interesting is that based on their study, they identified that 55% of all CIOs who participated in the study, they were identified as trusted operators. So their focus is mainly on the operational side of running IT, making sure that IT systems run efficiently and smoothly, making sure those IT systems are well maintained, and making sure that the costs and the budgets around those IT systems are well managed. So that's the trusted operator, and 55% of all CIOs fell into that particular pattern. The second pattern was the change instigator, and they realized that they discovered rather 11% of CIOs fell into this particular pattern. So a change instigator, the focus is largely on improving business processes within the organization, looking at change management projects, looking at things like digital capabilities, making sure that business services are, if you like. The third CIO pattern is the business co-creator, and were identified as is really around business innovation and business strategy, and thinking about ideas and initiatives in that particular space. It does cross over to digital, having to go through a digital transformation process, and that's going to be about changing the business model and changing the nature of those services. So there's a strong emphasis on business innovation. But 34% to that particular pattern has proposed. And as I said, now I would say that the modern CIO actually has to organization might be their focus may be more on using IT efficiently and effectively, in which case the appropriate CIO pattern, it depends. So another way to think about the role of the CIO is as a friend of the CEO, and think about what the CEO is typically most interested in. Well, they're interested in essentially three things. In a nutshell, making money. So that's increasing business, adding more sales, adding more customers. And IT could potentially be used to expand and grow the business. The second thing that the CEO is interested in is saving money. So reducing cost, automating stuff, enhancing productivity. All of these things will help to reduce costs and save money. And again, IT can be used effectively to save and reduce costs. And the third thing that CEO is interested in is staying out of trouble, which is essentially to make sure that they comply with any regulations, to reduce the amount of business risk, to make sure things are safe and secure. And again, IT has an important role there because IT can be used to make the business very safe and secure. So good IT leadership is also about helping the CEO do his or her job, and that's another way to look at the role of a CIO. Now, the CIO is not an easy role. In fact, it's a very, very challenging role. And what IT leaders have to deal with is they have to deal with lots of different types of questions and issues. There's a whole diversity of challenges that they have to deal with. For example, CIO might be asked, why do you need a particular budget? Can you justify that budget? So that's a financial question where CIO is going to have to work on the financials and show and demonstrate a return for a particular type of IT investment. Tell me how we can save 10% from our IT spend next year. So that's a challenging question about reducing the cost of IT ownership. You know, what are the ways in which an IT leader is able to do that? Why are 50% of your projects either late or over budget? So that, again, is another challenging kind of question to deal with, particularly if there's not a strong track record within the organization of delivering on IT projects. That's a question that the CIO would have to deal with. How will new technologies like cloud and analytics affect our business? So that's a question more around the future and the vision. And given that there's so much interest around cloud and business analytics, how does that impact on the business? How can it help the business? And here's a question about what competitors are doing. Why are they ahead of us in terms of their customer experience and offering? How can IT actually help us get ahead of our competitors? So as you can see, there's quite a large diversity of different questions that an IT leader has to deal with. Some of these questions may be around strategy. Some of them are around financials and return on investment. Some of them are to deal with operational issues and challenges. Some of them are around what competitors might be doing in the space, and some of them might be around the use of technologies to try and help the business. So there's a whole diversity of questions and challenges that today's IT leader has to really be able to answer in a compelling and convincing way. I think this slide is useful because it summarizes the 4 key priorities for an IT leader, and this is taken from Brian Lilly, who at the time is CIO of Equinix, and he puts it quite well. The 4 priorities are operational, transformational, innovation, and organizational. And I would say that all CIOs have to deal with all these 4 different aspects to a larger or lesser degree. So on the operational side, that's really delivering on the IT operations. It's focusing on the time, the budget, making sure the results, and making sure that things run as smoothly as possible. On the transformational side, we're looking at helping to transform how the business runs, improving processes, scaling up processes. These are all transformational and change projects. And then there's the innovation side, which is really looking ahead to the next few years, to seeing how industries are trying to evolve and what they're going to be like over the next few years. And as we know, industries are being affected by digitization and all manner of things. So looking at how the organization can evolve, adapt, and experiment in line with that. And the last piece, or the last priority, is organizational. We can't run anything without great people, and managing people, getting the right talent on board, building high performance teams, working with our technology partners. All these are organizational challenges that the CIO really has to be on top of, or rather the IT leader has to be on top of. So I think that's a good way to summarize the 4 priorities of the modern IT leader. Okay, so here's a little activity you can do to rate yourself as an IT leader, and this shouldn't take you more than 10 minutes. Basically, there are a set of, I think there are 9 questions here. Yeah, there are 9 questions here, and what I want you to do is give yourself a score from 1 to 10, depending upon how well you answer the question. So the questions are as follows. You are good at getting results. You understand the market environment. You are business savvy. You take a strategic view when required. You work well as part of a team. You know how to get the best out of others. You are comfortable and capable of leading teams. You get others to change, and your clients value the working relationship with you. So for each of these questions, give yourself a score from 1 to 10, 1 being very low or very poor, 10 being excellent or expert. And once you've done that, what I want you to do is total up your scores to come up with a final score. And the maximum score, given that there are 9 questions, is 90, and the lowest score will be activity. But if you have completed that activity and you've worked out your total score, I would say that anything 70 or above would be an excellent score. That shows that you're highly rated as an IT leader. Anything below that, there's obviously room for improvement. But this is a self-assessment exercise, so it could be that you're biased in your responses, but it just gives you an idea of your leadership qualities and how well you are cut out to be as an IT leader. So if you completed the survey in the previous video, you will have rated yourself as an IT leader. And the questions that I asked you in that survey is actually based on the work here by Egon Zeder, who actually worked with CIO.com to actually determine what the core competencies are for CIO success. So the questions that I asked in the previous video is actually based on the competencies here. So what they've done is identified 9 core competencies that are required for CIO success, and you can see the 9 competencies are listed here. So number 1, results orientation. Number 2, strategic orientation. Number 3, market knowledge. Number 4, commercial orientation. Number 5, customer focus. Number 6, change leadership. Number 7, team leadership. Number 8, people development. And number 9, collaboration and influence. Now, these are the skills required of an IT leader, and they are not that much different from the skills required of any kind of business leader or CEO for that matter. I think how this can be used is that it can be used to try and assess your own strengths and weaknesses as a leader. And we all have our own strengths and weaknesses. For example, you might be very good at getting results, a strong results orientation, but your customer focus might be an area that you need for development. Similarly, you might have really good market knowledge, but your leadership of a team and development of people may be an area for improvement. So I think this set of 9 core competencies is almost like a useful benchmarking tool It can be used to identify where you need to improve as an IT leader and the areas where you're already quite adept and well developed in. So I think to assess your own capabilities and competencies as well as. So I would say, but actually 6 hats. And I want to talk about these 6. So the first hat is the visionary hat. IT leaders have to be strategic. They have to look at the bigger picture and they have to understand what's going to happen in the future. So the visionary hat is an important hat. The second hat is the action man hat. And that's all about getting results, making sure that IT delivers, making sure that IT runs smoothly, making sure that IT projects get finished on time and to budget. So this is getting results. This is the action man hat. The third hat is the captain hat. And that's all about making sure that you build the right team, you build the right set of people, you get them aboard. You also collaborate effectively with your peers and with business stakeholders and with external providers, really the captain of the ship. So that's the third hat. The fourth hat is the accountant hat. And what I mean by there is that the IT leader has to be commercially savvy, has to be financially astute, has to understand concepts like return on investment and total cost of ownership. So that's understanding the financial aspects around IT. The fifth hat is the customer hat, and that's really understanding the customer experience. That's being able to put yourself in the shoes of the customer and understanding what their needs are. The sixth and final hat is the engineer hat. That's being able to be technically adept, to understand what the technology can do and what it can't do, to be able to engineer IT solutions that address business problems. So someone who understands the technology. So the modern IT leader really needs to understand all these different domains, and rather than just wearing a single hat, they actually need to be able to wear all these 6 different hats. Let's talk for a moment about the impact of IT leadership on the organization. And I would say IT leadership really has a tremendous impact on how well an organization does. So it's very, very significant. I would say strong IT leadership really enables the organization. What we see there is IT and the business working together as partners. We see IT operations running smoothly without any major issues, and we see a real positive return on IT spending. That's the impact of really strong IT leadership on an organization. When there's weak IT leadership, IT becomes an inhibitor to the business. What we see there is IT and the business stakeholders not really getting along. They're holding each other back and they're seen as enemies. What we also see is frequent IT disruptions. We see IT projects running late, over budget, delivering to poor quality, and we generally see a poor return on IT spending. So you can see that the impact of IT leadership is really quite significant. With very strong IT leadership, it really enables the business, but with poor or weak IT leadership, it becomes an inhibitor to the business. Okay, so let me ask you a question. What do these companies have in common? American Motors, Brown Shoe, Studbaker, Collins Radio, Detroit Steel, Zenith Electronics, and National Sugar Refining. What do these companies have in common? Well, the answer is that all of these companies were in the Fortune 500 in 1955, but not in 2014. So, same question again. What do these companies have in common? Boeing, Campbell Soup, General Motors, Kellogg, Procter & Gamble, Geary, IBM, and Whirlpool. So the answer is that all of these companies were in the Fortune 500 in both 1955 and 2014. What about these companies? Facebook, eBay, Home Depot, Microsoft, Office Depot, and Target. These companies may be a bit more familiar. What do they all have in common? So all of these companies were in the Fortune 500 in 2014, but not 1955. Okay, so the point here is that companies really can drop out quickly from the Fortune 500. Being part of the Fortune 500 is a great thing, but there's no guarantee of success or that you'll stay in the Fortune 500. In fact, 88% of Fortune 500 companies in 1955 are already gone. So the fortune of these companies do decline quite rapidly. Only 12% of the Fortune 500 companies in 1955 were still on the list 59 years later in 2014. And 50 years ago, the life expectancy of the firm in the Fortune 500 was around 75 years. Today, it's less than 15 years and it's declining all the time. So in an era of rapid market change, companies that fail to innovate and adapt may find themselves unable to compete and quickly and rapidly decline. So let's talk about some companies which were former industry leaders. Let's start with Kodak. Kodak was a leader in film photography for over 133 years. I think it's important for organizations to ask the question, what business are we really on? And I'm taking a quote here from Deloitte Digital. They say people don't need cars. They need to get from point A to point B. People don't need surgery. They need to get well. And I think this is quite an interesting comment because it's focusing on the customer's needs rather than the products or services that companies are often trying to sell. Kodak was one example of that. It was overly focused on ride-hailing companies just because they're a lot more reliable, they're a lot more cheaper, and they're much organizations. The key message is it's not really about selling things per se, but it's much more about satisfying the customer's needs. Now, for an IT leader, part of their role is to try and reimagine the business, or at least help the CEO and help the leadership team reimagine what's possible with technology. And obviously, with the advent and introduction of so many tech key roles, reimagining the business is about looking ahead, looking towards the future, free history, and thrive. That an IT trends are we? What do we see in terms of customer preferences? What are they tending to prefer these days? Where do we see our competitors having success? And that's just not restricted to the incumbent competitors, but also new players and new entrants to the market. These could be startups, for example. And how is digital impacting our business? What do we see as the direction there? So these are questions that IT leaders need to ask in trying to reimagine the business. And it's really about setting a strategic vision about what the industry, what the organization is going to be looking like 5, maybe even 10 years from now, and how does the organization position itself, particularly from an IT perspective. What does it need to do in order to be ready and to thrive in that new future? So here are some examples of companies which are either doing computers, that was its primary focus, but that's changed over the last few years. It's become much more of a digital lifestyle and service, consumer electronics. It's also gotten into Apple Music, the music business, more of a digital. AirAsia, Southeast Asia, into a broader suite of online travel services. So they've diversified into hotels, vacations. They've even launched a digital wallet. So again, this is another example where the company has reimagined its business. Nike, which is very successful in terms of sportswear, and that's where it started as a sportswear manufacturer, particularly with apparel and shoes. But we know that sportswear has become a big part of fashion these days, and what we've seen from Nike is also following that trend. It's become much more of a lifestyle and fashion company. In fact, if you look at the kind of clothing and the shoes that they sell, some of it is designed for the serious sports enthusiast, but then there's a big part of their business which is more about the lifestyle and the fashion side. Oracle, which is well known for its databases. In fact, that's where it started out as a database company, a very successful one. But since then it's come a long way. It's acquired other companies. It's got into different kinds of applications like customer relationship management, and other enterprise applications. It's expanded its portfolio. It's adding consulting and business services on top of that. So it's become a much more wholesome IT services stroke consulting slash product company that's much bigger than what it started out with. So again, Oracle's reimagined its business there in line with the needs of the industry. And Disney, which is obviously famous for the Disney films and the Disney characters, such as Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. But it's also kind of diversified over the years into entertainment and Reap. So these all build upon those wonderful Disney characters. Broad. So what might be a useful tool for you as an IT leader is the vision cone. And when you talk about the company vision or the IT vision, you're kind of essentially looking ahead to what the likely set of scenarios is going to be. And with a vision cone, it's easier to look ahead maybe 1 or 2 years, but really you want to look ahead beyond that, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, and about which plausible scenarios that you're thinking about. And really the leader is trying to look at those range of possibilities based on, if you like, the vision about what they feel the future is going to be. And it's also about looking at industry trends and signals, right? So in this volatile world, and sometimes people use the acronym VUCA, which stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So it's easier for us to think about what's going to happen in 2 years versus what's going to happen in 10, 20, 30 years, where it's much more harder to predict. So an IT leader's got to look at the kind of signals, the trends in the industry to try and anticipate what that future is going to be like. And they've got to set the direction accordingly. And that's where the strategy and the roadmap really comes in. So based on the vision, looking at what's likely going to happen in the future, setting the right direction for an organization, options and different scenarios. So it might be helpful to look at some examples of strategic vision for companies that we're probably familiar with, just to try and help us think about what might be the strategic vision for our own organization. So let's start with Microsoft. So Microsoft originally had a strategic vision, which was a computer on every desk and in every home. But they've changed that vision over the past few years, and now it's to enable people and businesses throughout the world to realize their full potential. So quite a grand vision. So the first thing to notice is that, the strategic vision does change because, at the time when Microsoft started way back, that vision of having that computer on every desk and in every home was very relevant. But obviously, technology has moved on and, we're now in the era of mobile phones. So that old vision has been updated accordingly. Tesla, which is the electric car company, vision here is to create the most compelling car company of 21st century by driving the world's transition to electric vehicles. So another kind of very relevant vision these days, given our migration away from fossil fuels. Amazon, to be the Earth's most customer-centric company where people can find and discover anything they want to buy online. Right, so interesting because Amazon obviously started out selling books online, but now literally You can buy anything possible online, and Amazon is a leader in that area. It's interesting because Amazon does everything online, but yet they still talk about being the most customer-centric company. So we often think about, the need for physical engagement to be customer-centric, whereas in reality, we don't necessarily need to have physical engagement. And, the technology that Amazon uses in terms of recommendations and stuff like that, it shows that technology can be used to build customer centricity. McDonald's, which is a non-tech company, talking about ordering online and stuff, and financial technology or fintech, being able to pay for things from your mobile phone and seamlessly. Now it's become very much driven by what's possible with the technology. And finally, Disney, which we've talked about earlier, to be the world's leading producer and provider of entertainment and information, right? So they're now an entertainment company, and a couple of years back they launched the Disney Plus streaming service, which they're rather late to the streaming game, but they're competing now very successfully with Netflix and the other providers. And I think what's unique about Disney is the Disney content is actually very unique. And that's a big draw for the Disney Plus streaming service. So these are all examples of companies with a strategic vision, and it might be helpful for you to think about those when you start formulating the strategic vision for your own organization. Okay, so it's all well and good having the strategic vision, but you've got to translate that vision down into some kind of strategy that's meaningful for the organization, where it can take action. And let's just look at an example of that with Tesla. So the vision for Tesla, as created by its founder Elon Musk, is to create the most compelling car company of the 21st century by driving the world's transition to electric vehicles. So that's the vision. This is the master plan, and this is what Elon Musk has published himself. The master plan is to build a sports car, to use that money to build an affordable car, to use that money to build an even more affordable car, and while doing the above, provide zero emission electric power generation options, and don't tell anyone. He's obviously told people, but there's a master plan behind how Tesla wants to achieve that vision, and that's almost like having a strategy in place, or at least having the nuts and bolts of a strategy. So this does translate into a number of strategic moves, if you like. Firstly, it's around building the best affordable electric cars, right? And then creating at the same time sustainable electric energy solutions. And Tesla has this gigafactory where it's building all this battery technology and investing in this battery technology. And the third strategic move, if you like, is to sell direct to customers via online, the Tesla shop. So you don't have the typical car dealership with Tesla. You typically are going to buy stuff online directly from Tesla, which is very different from how other automakers operate. So I think this is a good example about how Tesla has taken its strategy, it has taken its vision and started to translate that vision into some kind of meaningful strategy that the organization can implement and execute in order to actually meet its vision. So with strategy, we're really talking about how can an organization develop competitive advantage in the industry that it works in. And I'm taking the quote here from Professor Michael Porter from the Harvard Business School. He's probably one of the thought leaders in the area, and he defined strategy as describing how an organization will win, outlining its distinctive approach and competitive advantage. And I think the emphasis on winning is kind of really important. I think there are two essential processes which are important here. I think the first is to make sure that your organization understands the competition and is clearly focused on outdoing the competition, because the reality is there are so many players, and new developments in the industry provide new opportunities for new players, and as an organization you're always having to understand what your competitors are doing and really try and offer a superior product or service. Kind of understandings are and what it can be disruptive, right? So the advent of digital photography changed, the nature of the photographic business for good. So these are examples where you've got to be able to understand what the trends and directions are within the industry. And technology is having a major impact on many industries at the moment. So strategy is really about where you can get competitive advantage, and that in turn is about understanding what your competitors are doing, and also what the direction is within the industry as a whole. So we've talked about the importance of understanding the trends and directions of the industry that an organization is currently operating in. I think a tool that might be useful is the pestle analysis. And that's kind of a tool to try and understand some of the changes within the industry. And industries are facing wave after wave of change, and they're constantly having to try and keep up these days. So this tool might be quite useful. PESTLE is an acronym, and let's go through each of these in more detail. So the P stands for politics. It's important for organizations to understand the political situation and how it's affecting the industry. In particular, reference to government policy, tax policy, and any industry regulations is going to be important. The economic situation in a particular region or country is also important. Some countries have higher economic growth than others, and some are in a different type of economic cycle. So things like the growth, the employment, and inflation, these are aspects of the economy which are important to consider. Some of the social aspects are also important. Things like demographics, lifestyles and attitudes. These may also play a role in the development of the industry. We are, of course, getting more into things like healthy living and healthy lifestyle, and that might affect certain products. Technological change and development. This is a big thing, and probably for IT leaders, this is the thing that's most relevant for them. And changes in technology innovation, and in this space, particularly with analytics and artificial intelligence, virtual reality, these are a major impact. Ethics, this is also a key thing to watch. So things like climate change, sustainability, these are things which matter to people these days. So understanding, and also legal. So things like patents, antitrust laws, and data protection are very important. Right now we're talking about the power that companies like Google, Facebook, and Apple, etc., have, with data and data privacy, and there's a whole set of legal arguments around that. So if you're looking at the changes and trends and developments within an industry, this tool, the pestle analysis, might be useful. The New York Times is, like a lot of media and themselves, Times is a brand that's been around for over 170 years, and now it's trying to move into a kind of digital subscription, type of model now, with the advent of all that's happening. And they recently brought on a CEO, Mark Thompson, to try and help with that transition. So some of the things going on is, as a traditional media company that used to publish newspapers, obviously, that is a trend that's could be fading, and they're trying to adapt to the digital environment. So we're seeing some from a pestle analysis. We're seeing technological changes. We're seeing that shift from the physical newspaper format to a digital format. The other aspect to consider is that people have now easy access to free news. They don't necessarily need to pay for news anymore. There's plenty of news which is available on the internet. Why would someone pay for news? And also personalized news, which wasn't really possible with the physical paper format. With the online format, you can now receive news which is more personalized and customized to your needs, and that's now possible with the technology. So from a technological perspective, we're seeing some changes and directions there. And also from a social perspective, in the early days, I guess, before we had mobile phones and this kind of technology devices, people were used to reading newspapers, right? People were used to carrying around a newspaper. But now most of us, particularly the younger generation, they're a lot more used to carrying around a electronic device and consuming news from that particular device, whether it's a mobile phone or a tablet device. There's a social change now, a social shift about how people consume news. And the question has to be asked whether or not traditional print newspapers really have a future, and given what we're seeing now with these changes which are happening in the for the digital age. So in a previous video, we talked about the need to do a competitive analysis to understand what your competitors are doing and to make sure that your products or services are superior in some way. And a tool that can help you do that is a best analysis. And this is simply asking the question, what does your organization's products or services do which are significantly better than your competitors? You don't have to be better in all these different areas. You probably need to be better in one or maybe two areas which are significant and which are important from a customer perspective. So asking that question, that simple question, is actually very, very powerful. These are some of the areas where you could be better in terms of what your product or service is offering. It could be cheaper, for example. That might be important. It could be better designed or have better performance. It could be more stylish. It could be something that has more features. It could be a product that's a lot more reliable and secure. It could be easier or more convenient to use. It could be easy to buy. It could simply be a better perceived brand. It could have a longer warranty. You might be providing a much better customer experience. You might be providing better facilities or simply better value for money. Right, whatever it is, it must be meaningful and important to customers. So that's what a best analysis is. It's simply asking the question, what do your company's products or services do which is significantly better than its competitors? So if we do a best analysis with Aldi, which is a discount supermarket chain, we find that what Aldi offers better than its competitors is that it offers a better price for the products that it sells, right? So if you're not familiar with Aldi, Aldi has over 9,000 stores in 18 different countries. It's mainly focused in Europe, and it has a turnover of $50 billion, 50 billion euros. So this is what the inside of an Aldi supermarket store looks like. Remember, the focus is on really offering the best price. So it has basically a very big, the inside of these stores are quite basic in design. So Aldi specializes in staple items such as foods and beverages. Many of the products that it sells is actually its own brands, and there's a very, very small limited number of other brands. And the interior of the supermarkets are very simple. It typically is located in low rent or out of center locations, and there's a focus on self-service rather than customer service. And all of this, what this does is really help Aldi to kind of keep its costs low, and as a consequence, it's able to offer the best price. Let's look at another example, which is Hamleys. Hamleys is the toy retailer. And if you do a best analysis, what you conclude is that really Hamleys is focused on providing the best buying experience, right? So Hamley does position itself as the finest toy shop in the world. And if you look at the design of the stores, you can see that these stores are extremely kind of enticing. A lot of the stores are themed stores, and they have a huge selection of toys and games. These Hamley stores are typically located in high traffic areas such as high streets and high-end shopping malls, and that's very much consistent with this best buying experience. And the stores usually have a variety of in-store activities which are designed really to attract children and families, and they have lots of play areas there. And families will spend hours basically in these stores, particularly around the Christmas period and times like that where they're extremely busy. And what it's providing is that it's providing a unique buying experience for its customers. So sure enough, you can probably buy the same item cheaper online somewhere else, but that's not the focus for Hamleys. Hamleys is focused on providing the about Disney is that the moved its own in 7 US Disney and provider of the best family content. Okay, so it's all well and good having strategy, but at the end of the day, companies resemble Arthur Barker from his book Future Edge. Having a vision without execution remains a dream, and execution without vision is just groping in the dark. So companies really need to have both things. Yeah, they need to have that vision, and they also need to be able to execute that vision as well. So I think this analogy of a boat is quite useful. So a boat really has two important components. Firstly, the rudder, which controls the direction. That's almost like the strategy. Yeah, the direction that you're going in, that's like the strategy. And the engine really determines how fast you go. And that's more about the execution side. And when we talk about execution, we're typically talking about the kind of resources, capabilities, assets in order to get things done, right? And a lot of that is down to people and talent and giving them the right kind of tools to actually go ahead and do stuff. Just an interesting quote here, 67% of strategies fail due to execution. So, a lot of people, you can have all these great strategies, but at the end of the day, being able to execute them is just as important. And what we find is that with agile organizations, they can change their strategy relatively quickly. They can restart their engines very quickly. And, if the industry is moving in a particular direction, they can generally change course or make adjustments to their strategy quite quickly. And it's typically harder to do that in a larger organization just because, the amount of change, it's much harder to do in a bigger organization. So we're talking about this concept of executable strategy, and strategy, execution, planning. These are really things which go hand in hand, and they're essentially two sides of the same coin. So when we talk about strategy, we're focusing on the external stuff, the markets, the industry, the opportunities, the products, the services, the customer needs. These are all things around what is happening or what is needed in the marketplace. When we're talking about execution, we're talking about internal stuff. We're talking about the stuff that an organization needs in order to get done. So that's things around resources, capabilities, competencies, assets, and skill. All strategy at the end of the day has to be executable. So as an IT leader, you might be in a position where you have to present or share the business strategy with an audience. It could be a leadership team, it could be the CEO, it could be your board members. And being able to convey the strategy in a concise way is going to be extremely important. And I've always been an advocate. If you can communicate these kinds of things in a very simple, easy to understand way, then you're much more likely to get positive engagement and feedback. And I think a useful tool for doing that is something called the business model canvas. I can't remember who the original authors of this framework are, but it's a nice, simple way to articulate strategy, and I would recommend you use something like this going forward. So I'm going to explain the business model canvas and the different elements, and then I'll show you an example of it. So this has a few different components. The first component to think about is the value proposition. So that's really crucial. What problem are we trying to solve for our customers? Related to that is the second component, which is the customer segment. Who are we creating value for? And that customer segment could be a particular geographical segment, or it could be a demographic segment. We typically are not trying to target everyone in the world. We're focused on a particular customer segment. Channels, so how do we reach out to customers? How do we get new customers on board? How do we keep customers? And obviously, the internet and social media and things like that could be very important. How do we nurture and build customer relationships, right? This is something that Amazon does very well, even though there's no human engagement. How it uses technology is actually quite interesting, but that's all about customer relationships. Some of that could be online, some of that could be face-to-face, or it could be a hybrid model. So what key activities do we need in order to create our value proposition? So there's a set of activities that have to go on there. It could be manufacturing, it could be sales, it could be promotion, it could be customer service. All that is part of creating this value proposition. And what key resources do we need in order to do that? And partnerships, do we need to work with key partners and suppliers in order to deliver that? And if so, what role do they play? And then a couple of basics: revenue streams, how and where revenue is generated, how that happens, and cost structure. What are the major cost items of running the business? So in a nutshell, this is the different elements of the business model canvas. And I think it's a good framework to use if you're asked to try and prepare your strategy in a very easy to understand, very simple way. I would always recommend this over, a long document or a long-winded PowerPoint presentation. So here is an example of the business model canvas applied to Spotify.